thought it would be useful to share some tips that I use when it comes to working through a busy schedule when there's lots of conflicting things on that need to be done, whether it's at work or in your personal life. Maybe you're moving house, or you have a lot of projects on at work, or you're doing all these courses at the moment. So I know that there can be a sense of overwhelm of, holy hell, how do I get through all of this? How can I possibly get it all done? And I know in a lot of the corporate clients that I speak to as well, a lot of my clients, they are feeling this, especially at the moment, of this is so big, I cannot possibly get through this in any way at any stage. I cannot possibly get through all of this on time. So while it's important to acknowledge the bigness, there are things that you can do that can help, at the very least, structure your time and your mindset and your approach. And if you're not someone who thrives on structure, you might just try it to see. I am someone who thrives on a little bit of structure, just enough to get me into it, but I am also aware that I need space in my structure. So this is in the instance of when there's an acute level of workload to get through, not something that should be on an ongoing basis if you know that you need space or a little bit more time to flow, because I totally get it. So the first step is, there's 5 steps that I've figured out here, but the first step is just take inventory of what needs doing, and I recommend writing it down. The reason I say to write it down is because it gets it from your head, where it's creating chaos and a mess and probably a lot of stress, onto paper, and your brain can go, oh cool, I can let go of that stress in case I forget something, because I know that it's written down and I can always come back to it. So I feel safe to let some of those racing thoughts just be a little bit if I can. So take inventory of what needs doing. Definitely just write it out. It doesn't need to be in any particular order just yet. Just get it down. Number 2 is get an idea of the timeline. So with each of those things, figure out when they are due by. What needs to be done by when, so that way you can see how much time you have for each, and start to allocate accordingly. And then it goes into seamlessly into step 3, which is putting it into the most logical order. So some advice that I gave someone recently about moving house is, don't worry about ordering your clothes in the closet until you've moved all your shit out of the old house, especially if that deadline of having everything out of the old house is looming or has come. Focus on that first. Just get all the stuff to the new house and then organize. As much as I know that it's really nice to just sort of place everything in, and there's an element of double handling if you don't, but if it's about that time crunch and you're really, really down to it, get everything from there to here, then sort it out. The most logical order just allows things to just work in a way that you're not stressing out spending time and energy on something that doesn't need to be done by a certain time. So you look at those times or those dates when things really need to be done by, or what can be pushed off. So that can really help with stress if you are really down to the line. And number 4 is the practical aspect of it. Schedule it in. So time blocking, look at your day, look at what hours you realistically have free. If you're working still and you have a project outside of work, or if it's a work project, look at the days and try to stay within your work hours initially. Because I know that in some instances, especially with work, when things come up, sometimes it will require times to work outside of those hours, but that should not be the norm. It should only be in special instances for small amounts of time for special projects. That should not become what your work life is like just because that's the way it is. So try to schedule your time in, fitting it within those hours, and then do your best with that. There's the whole theory that sometimes we take the time to complete something based on the time that we've allocated it. That will play a role here, but at the same time, I'm also aware that sometimes it just is impossible. But for your own sanity, for your own well-being and boundaries as well, start with the hours that you have. And if it starts to feel impossible, then just allow, when you need to work outside of that, but start by scheduling in the hours that you do have and see what happens if you do. So time blocking works really well is when you put all your distractions aside, your phone, your TV, your whatever, and you just allocate half an hour, 2 hours, however much you feel you need for that project to get it done. You can set the timer so you don't feel like you have to check the time, especially if you're still checking your time on your phone. You can just set the timer, trust that it will go off when that time is done, and that also lets your brain know that there is going to be an end point, so it is safe to focus because it will get to go and have all the distractions at once when you have a break at the end of that 2 hours. So time block. And number 5 is really important, especially when you're super busy, is to make sure that you get your rest wherever possible. If you need to create it as a really important boundary at your home life, if you say like, I really need to get to bed by this stage tonight, it is a non-negotiable, so I need to start winding down by this time. Get your rest. Make sure you prioritize your rest, because your rest is what's going to keep you healthy when your stress levels are spiking during this busy time. And that is super important to take care of, because otherwise you'll wind up burning out a little, your immune system will be down, which means you'll be more susceptible to just getting run down, getting sick from just the cold even, and then having to deal with that anyway. So make sure you get your rest. I hope this has been helpful. This is what works for me. It doesn't make the busyness or the feeling of busyness go away, but for me, it kind of just gives me this sense of, okay, I do got this. I have to stay focused. This is my plan, and it can only be a plan in the short term, because otherwise it is too long, it's too prolonged, too chronic of a stress. So it can only be okay, this is my plan for the week. I can just get through this. I have a break coming up. And that actually helps me get through it. It helps me prepare the things that I need to prepare ahead of time so that I don't have to deal with them. So like meal planning, things like that, the humaning, adulting things that show up in life that can sometimes feel like they get in the way. So that is what works for me. It might work for you. Something else might work for you, but at the very least, it might at least spark that thought of what does work for you, so you can take care of yourself, especially when you feel super busy.